I am well. I'm well. It's an exciting week. We've done two in a month now, which is fancy.
That's
Like
double what we've done in the
that's
past.
double what we've done in the past. We're a little earlier tonight. We normally do our stuff at 9 p.m., but it's 7 o'clock. In fact, I'm looking up at the top left. It says 9 p.m. Are we good? Are we good? Do they know that we're live?
It is live now, so it's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. But
Because the
yeah,
preview never changed. So
but we have an awesome guest. So John Lees, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kissing his ass. Is literally one of my top 10 comic writers. I love his stuff. I'm a crime. Crime is my favorite genre. So he writes a lot of things that's kind of a mix of horror and crime, which I love. So I can't wait to talk to him. John is actually everyone who've had up till now are people I have really strong relationship with. And it's not that John and I don't have a relationship. We've talked a few times, but I've never got to interview him. You've got to, but I've never
I've
actually
gotten to
had a
interview
one-on-one.
John. I've gotten to interview him twice. One of them just never got out into the world, so we did it again because we had to redo it.
Right.
But
Is it because of all the vulgar things that John said?
yes, it went
Yes.
way too far.
Right.
So we'll release the Lee's cut at some point. It's just
So
crazy, but
I'm
uh,
excited about the Lee's cut. I'll be honest.
it's good times. But yeah, no, I have been since a big fan of John since the Hotel Volume 1 when that was discovered early on in the pandemic, and then I've been catching up since then, and I've caught up
So,
very recently. We can talk about that at some point.
so for me, I'm a comic strip fan. I was a big fan of Red 10 from Tyler James. So I read the standard. I mean, back in the day, I was like, John Lees is the lesser, right? Tyler James is the big comic writer, and he hasn't written a comic in years. I think the last thing was Nightwolf. He wrote a 4-pager with me, where John Lees is pumping out 2 or 3 books a year, like killing it. Working with AWA, also awesome stuff. But yeah. So a couple of things, just so I don't forget. Coins of Judas. I normally don't talk about my stuff, but I'm just going to let people know that comes out on the 18th. So that's this Wednesday. So make sure you pick it up. I've got it right there. Make sure you pick that up. And then Granite State Punk orders are at the end of this week. So make sure you order Granite State Punk. It's a good book. I'm a
Yeah,
little biased, but order it. But
yeah, do that.
I'm ready to level up, Todd. Are you ready to level up?
I've been waiting for so long to level up. Let's do it.
Sick
Let's
of
level
grinding?
up. This is Comic Level Up. It's the intro. Now we should level up with John Lees.
We should level up with John Lees. Let's invite him on.
Let's do it.
Wow, that was
Hey.
impressive. Well, literally, like, if this was like, an award show or something, I came on to like walk on stage like twice, then another bit of music's played off, and I've had to kind of step back again. You're like, oh, it's not my cue yet.
Almost. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hi, yeah, hello. Just like I was listening on that wee intro there, like I'm quite, upset about your mischaracterization of that first cancelled show. You told me it was because of like the intense sexual chemistry was just too much and everything. I had to kind of like dial back for the repeat viewing.
Yeah, I mean, you can have both. It can be both of those things.
But yeah, thanks for having me back on. I'm really pleased to be chatting with you and Travis. Travis, we've been sort of social media pals going way back, but I think we've only ever communicated through like the written word rather than like interview style. So it's nice to like have a chat in an interview format.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and I'm happy that to talk to you. I have a love for anything Scotland because I'm a huge Highlander fan. So I need to know before we start this because it is going to affect everything going forward. Do you like Duncan or do you like Connor for the Highlander? Which is your Highlander?
I am a bit. Well, it's been long enough since I've seen Highlander that I can't remember the names, but Christopher Lambert is my
Christopher
favorite.
Lambert. All right.
Is that Duncan?
No. That's Connor. Connor
yeah.
McLeod is Christopher Lambert, and Duncan is Antonio Banderas. No, wait, that's not right. Adrian Paul, not Antonio Banderas.
I was chirped in. I'm like, what?
I can't remember.
That is Mr.
Watch those movies.
They both have long ponytails, so therefore they're basically the same person.
Yeah.
But no, I'm very much like the OG. For me, like obviously when you're in Scotland, like Highland is like a fascinating like curio of a film, where you have like a Frenchman playing a Scotsman and a Scotsman playing like an Egyptian Spaniard. It's quite and none of them bothered to change their accent, so it's even better.
Yeah, so I was obsessed with Highlander. Like, I know I just made that joke, but I'm not kidding. I wore all black in a trench coat. Anything to guarantee.
You decapitated people in the street.
I did not do that. But I
just muttering to yourself. That could be only one.
Big fan.
Yeah.
I played while everyone else was playing Magic the Gathering, I was playing Highlander the card game. Like with people, like I was hardcore.
By yourself? You have a lot of
no.
With?
No, I played. The only time I ever gave it up.
There could only be one member, so if there's more than one person playing it, then
it's too much. It's too much. But I gave it up for Vampire, because I saw Goth Girls. I was like, I like that better. That's but
it's better than
you get
Antonio
the long
Banderas.
hair and the swords and like the dark clothes, but then you also had like Goth Vampire Girls.
It works because the wardrobe actually translated pretty easily over. It's really nice. You keep the trench coat and
but I lied to everyone when I was growing up and saying I was Scottish. I was like, "Oh, I'm Scottish," and I was like, "No."
Are you one of these people like that's like been American for like 4 generations and walking around going, "I'm Scottish"?
Yes.
But here's the crazy thing. So I lied to everybody. But as far as I knew, I was English, French, and a little bit of Native American, because everybody has a little bit of Native American if you've been in 4 generations in America. But my mother-in-law does my Ancestry.com, and I found out I'm like wicked Scottish. Like crazy amounts of Scottish. I was like, shit, I was telling the truth. Well, I'm from New Hampshire, so it's wicked. We're wicked Scottish.
I know, it's pretty great. It's a nice
all the Scots that came on from the Mayflower. You didn't hear about that.
Wicked Scottish.
You have wicked Scottish.
We all pulled into Boston Harbor. Got some Duncan. So, anyways, let's talk about your amazing career. And so I want to hear the story. Let's start at the beginning. How did you meet Comics Tribe? Like, how did that happen?
Oh, my comics origin story.
Yeah.
Well, the way it started out for me, like, in comics was probably going way back to like, probably have to go back to like 2008, 2009, where like I'd graduated from university. I did film studies at university, and I was going to do like a short film. And I had like the script ready, and I was starting to do prepping that. Then that kind of all fell apart. Like I lost the location, lost all various elements. So I was kind of at a loose end about what am I going to do now. And a friend of mine who was an artist said like, and we kind of like, one of the main things that we had like as part of our friendship, and still is we were like the only 2 people like like me and you in person that actually like liked comics. So we'd meet up and we'd swap comics and we'd do all this stuff. And so he said to me, I want to draw a comic, can you write it? And I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I'd always liked comics. I'd never put the 2 together, like you could write comics. But then like when I looked at it, I sort of read up in the whole process of writing comics, and it was actually quite fascinating, like the structure of it, the limitations of it. Like I thought it was like a really interesting medium. And my friend had this idea of doing a really kind of indie, lo-fi kind of like noir story, but they had this kind of like scratchy charcoal style, very expressionistic, and moody, and like they wanted me to write something for that. But I then went and wrote like the standard issue 1, which was the first one. Totally different from what they were looking for. And they were like, I don't think this is going to work. Maybe we should just, leave it. But I had the script, after writing it. And then I noticed there was a website called Project Fanboy, and Stephen Forbes, the editor, had a column on it called The Proving Grounds, which later migrated over to Comics Tribe, but the first it was on Project Fanboy. And as part of this, The Proving Grounds, Stephen Forbes would like review scripts to people sent him, and he'd usually just like tear them apart like viciously, like Simon Cowell style, like like this is terrible, go get a job as an accountant, like what you doing, like and it was. So I was reading these, and I was thinking, well, I've got this one script that I've just written and put in a drawer. It'd be quite interesting to kind of like submit this and just see where I'm going wrong. So I submitted it. And I actually messaged, Stephen Forbes first, and I was like, don't kill me. And he's like, and I still remember his first interaction, his email. He said, "I'm not an ogre." I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but like, he did convince me enough, And he's like, what you should do is before you submit your script, read through my kind of how-to series, and because he had another column called Bolts and Nuts, which is kind of like how-to for making comics. He said, go read through that, and then submit your script after doing that. So I did. I went and read through Bolts and Nuts, and it kind of taught me a lot about how to make comics. And there's a lot of stuff in there that I still apply to my scripts to this day, like 12 years later. And then I made some changes, and then I submitted the issue 1 of the Standard to the Proving Grounds. And when it finally came time for my script to be up, I actually got a positive review, and I was like, "Oh my god, thank God! This is the first kind of positive review I've seen in the Proving Grounds." And he was really kind of quite he had some notes and some things he'd changed, but it was overall very positive and complimentary. And he wrote at the end of it, "This is the first script for the Proving Grounds where once I'd finished the 5-page excerpt, for the purposes of the column, I kept on reading to the end because I wanted to see what happened next." And then afterwards, he messaged me privately, and he's like, "I think you could probably make this into a comic, So I brought him on board as an editor because I knew nothing about making comics, and we started working on making the Standard. It was a kind of long process trying to find artists, but we eventually found, after a couple of misfires, we settled on Jonathan Rector. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Standard is a kind of superhero comic about a superhero from the 1960s who gets old and retires and becomes a chemistry teacher. Then he has to come out of retirement in the present day to investigate the death of his former sidekick. So yeah, that's it was a 6-issue series, which in hindsight it was insane to start my comics career with a 6-issue series. But but I did it. I jumped in at the deep end and kind of learned how to make comics essentially from doing this book. And after I'd written it all, Jonathan had started on art. Once I'd finished scripting it, Stephen said to me, "Well, now you've got a choice. Either we can start pitching this around to various publishers and see where it lands, see if we can get any traction. If you want to do that route, I'll happily take that route with you." The other option is my friend Tyler James is just launching up a new imprint called Comics Tribe. And he said the idea of this is going to be that we start off, we're going to have a website, we're going to have creator tools and resources for comics creators, and then we're going to kind of from there transition into releasing comics of our own. And they had a kind of launch lineup. They had the Red 10, they had Joe Mulvey's Scam, they had a book that Stephen was doing called Runners, and they had Epic also from Tyler James, and they wanted the Standard to join that lineup. And it seemed to fit quite nicely because the indie comics landscape at that time, it was quite hard to get a sort of indie superhero book up and running at that stage. But here was a publisher where pretty much everything they were doing was kind of clever revisionist takes on superheroes with various twists. And I thought this fits in nicely with this lineup. So I thought, yeah, maybe it's kind of going in it's not a big publisher, but it's jumping into the ground floor and it's been part of something, and it's with people who are invested and care about you. And so yeah, I jumped on board, Comics Tribe just as we were starting up. And yeah, I remember I went to their first New York Comic Con, I think it was, in 2011. And I was there. I travelled to America. Literally, the first ever comic convention I did was a tiny little comic mart in Glasgow University in a kind of single hall where I sat there with 5 other tables of creators. And most of the day, it was just students walking into the room, thinking it was free beer, finding out there was no beer and leaving. So that I went from that, and that was let's say the end of September. Then the second convention I ever did 1 week later was New York Comic Con. So wow. It was a bit of an adjustment, but Yeah, so like it was like, yeah, so that's how I kind of paired up with Comics Tribe, and the rest is history. Like I did the standard with them, and I did a whole bunch of other stuff. And yes, this is indeed Golden Burrito Award winner John Lee's. I'm gonna have that. I'll have that put in my headstone.
Highest honor in comics.
Yeah,
I also have one.
yeah, I have that
It's
written on my
true.
ceiling. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, "You're a Golden Burrito Award
Nice.
winner." The rest of this day is going to be misery. But you can at least start off with Golden Burrito Award winner.
Start every morning with a golden burrito.
Yeah.
Well, and this, I don't know if this is true, but Scotland, you have Haggis Bell instead of Taco Bell, right? You don't have tacos, so you don't know what burritos are. So it's such a rare delicacy.
I know. Well, we've fine palates here in Scotland. Like I have. We do enjoy burritos, but we do also enjoy a haggis and the deep fat fry everything here. We have deep fat fried chocolate bars, and and various other kind of special delicacies. But don't knock it. Haggis is delish.
I've had good haggis before. Yeah, because it's I don't know why people are weirded out by it, because it's like, oh, it's like a stomach. It's like, you know what sausage is?
Yes, I'm saying people go, oh, do you know the haggis is the heart, lungs, and liver of a sheep boiled in its own stomach? And you go, yeah, now do sausages. It's like,
Yeah, like we eat that all the time. It's just you don't know.
Sausages are great. I don't care about that. It's like,
yeah,
it's
delicious.
Me, like, you can tell me that like it was a unicorn put in a blender and then put in a casing.
Right?
I'm like, well, it's still a sausage. So
as long as it's in casing, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for you, for my path for you, because where Todd hasn't even discovered you in the Comics Tribe, I have, because I met Tyler James at Boston Comic Con, and he handed me Red 10, and I laughed at him. Respectfully, I was like, there's no way you're putting out 10 issues. I was like, there's no way. And he did. It took him a long time. But he did. So I had followed you through that, and I bought Epic, and I bought Standard when it came out, and then I bought the Emily, and I bought all your Comics Tribe stuff, and then I lost track of you, and I don't even think I knew you were the writer of all of them. You were just like many people, right? We read books and we like the books, but we don't know who the writer is. And then the Blue Van tour was appearing on my Twitter feed on the regular. Because you guys were coming to Jetpack Comics. I don't know if Tyler went, who went to that, because I don't even live in New Hampshire. I was living in Orlando at the time. But it was everywhere. I was like, what the hell is this? And that's when I picked up Sync, and it was literally the best book I read that year. And my favorite book to pick up every time it comes out. Top and Stack, love Sync, love it more than anything. Tell us about that creation and what that's all about.
Well, first off, when you mentioned Tyler and the 10 issues of Red 10, I will say kudos to Tyler. That is a hell of an achievement, getting out 10 issues of that book, And I actually remember I was at New York Comic Con when they'd finished that series, and I was like, I just spotted those lovely hardcovers of Sync nicely.
Nice, so pretty.
I remember saying, what now? Like, you finished the Red 10, like, what happens next? And it was like, it was a bit like looking at like Frodo once he's returned to the Shire after did they send in the ring to Mount Doom? You can't really go home. So every time I talk to him, now you have to come up with the next thing, Tyler. But yeah, before we jump to Sync, I should also briefly mention, I mentioned the Standard, but my next book after that was And Then Emily Was Gone, also through Comics Tribe. And that was
isn't that, but it's so good. It's so good.
It's funny because that was like, I did that with Ian Laurie, and also he's a Scottish artist. And when we came up with that, we actually came up with that. We were specifically thinking, let's just do something that's just for us, that we can maybe sell at a couple of wee shows in Glasgow. It's going to be too weird for anybody else. But then through a various of circumstances, Comics Tribe ended up picking it up, and it went, big. And the Standard, which had been the book that we had all these high hopes for, ended up not doing too well in the direct market. But When Emily Was Gone, which is this weird little kind of creepy Lynchian horror set in this small island,
right.
Weird is an understatement.
And this book, ended up being a big breakout hit, which we had, because we thought it was going to be just this our wee thing, but it ended up really breaking out and really found an audience. And that was the first time I really experienced, other creators kind of noticing our stuff and, publishers taking notice. And so, yeah, that was a real fun experience from there. Then, for a while, that was what I was best known for. And the kind of cool thing is that even like coming up in 10 years after that book first came out, people still mention it, which is great. But yeah, like after that, like, you know, the next big kind of like level up to get back into the title was like when Sync came out. And Sync was one of these books where like I'd had the idea in my head for quite a while of like, you know, like Scalped was my favourite comic at the time. It just still is one of my favourite comics. And I had the idea of like I wanted to do like my own epic, which is like, you know, I'm just gonna keep on talking so we don't notice that Todd's like, you know, made a mess of himself.
What?
I'm not sure if he's
No.
peed himself or spilled a drink or what.
But I did both.
He gets so excited about
Why not?
that he just like, you know, peed everywhere. All right. But yeah, it's understandable. But yeah, like so. Yeah, so like, I had the idea in my head of like wanting to do a big epic built around the location. You know, like Scouts built around the Prairie Rose Indians, I think, you know, or you know, like. But I wanted to make it Scottish. I wanted to do something set in Glasgow. I wanted it to be a kind of like twisted love letter to Scotland. And I had this idea, and this is going to be like my big book. And this is going to be not just a mini. It's going to be like, you know. But I didn't want to do it until I was ready to do it, and I kind of thought this was going to be the book that I take, like, you know, to, or this could be like my image book or whatever, you know. But then, like, you know, when I started thinking of the idea for it, like when I eventually got around to thinking, let's develop this, it was actually I'd done Oxymoron, The Loveliest Nightmare, with Alex Cormack, which was a fun book. It's kind of like the origins of the villain in the Red 10. It's like a big serial killer, you know, mystery, horror, thriller. But it was fun to work with, but I felt like you were playing with somebody else's toys, you know, like it's Tyler's creation, it's Tyler's baby. Sure. So like I was talking to Alex about, let's do something that's just ours. And then that's when Sync came up. And like it turns out like, you know, that is like, you know, a hard book to pitch because like essentially Sync is it's a kind of like hard-boiled horror crime series, kind of like set in this kind of like run-down, nightmarish district of Glasgow called Sink Hill, and there's no real, you know, like it's largely one-shots. Like each issue is its own standalone story. It's gradually taking shape into a bigger narrative, but it's hard to pitch that. So like the pitch, we made a little pitch book which had lots of various mini pitches for each of the individual issues, but no publisher really bit at the time, and like, you know, like Comics Tribe, who'd been really supportive. Like I talked to Tyler about it, and he was like, "Yeah, I have ideas for how we could do this." And like he was the one that came up with this idea of like starting through the mailing list, they kind of really doing a kind of like grassroots campaign. And so the plan was going to be that we would like release the first issue, at least for, you know, I think we did the first few issues eventually for free, like digitally on a newsletter if you subscribed. And then that would lead eventually to going to Kickstarter to get a print version of the first issue. And then we would then go to the direct market. And like that's one of these things where if you're kind of like old school thinking, you're thinking if people can read it for free, are they going to want to read the book in print? But weirdly enough, like Tyler like knows what he's talking about. Like it seemed like that whole grassroots campaign really helped build a strong following and really entrench a strong following, because the way comics work, and you know this as well, like Travis, you know, you've got books coming out and stuff, but like it's like the lifespan of a book is you announce the book like a month before it comes up for pre-order, maybe. Sure. The book's up for pre-order. You have like 2 months of like pre-orders or whatever, like a month and a bit, then you have FOC.
Yeah.
Then the book comes out. Then each month you have each issue of the book coming out. Then you have the trade coming out, and it's done. But the way this worked with Sync is we kind of like hacked that lifespan, so the book was something that existed for like a year before it actually kind of came to the direct market.
Right.
So we had like the kind of like grassroots campaign, like getting the van and stuff, like going to the newsletter approach and kind of like getting subscribers who then, because we built up that subscribers base, we then carried it over to Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter was a breakout success, and more folk came on with the Kickstarter, and then because of that, we then had a kind of group of established readers who were ready to kind of jump on when it came out in the direct market. And one of the fortuitous things about the direct market launch was, again, we couldn't have planned this, but first in 2016, I believe, 2016 New York Comic Con, we had like a kind of special preview edition of issue 1 available.
Mhm.
And that week when we were in New York, the kind of whole, I'm not sure if you remember, it was this whole like killer clowns viral thing going around. Like,
yeah, they were going in front of houses and they kept having cameras.
There was a whole panic about it and stuff.
Yeah.
That hit its apex just around the time of New York, of like, and I'm not, for anyone who doesn't know about Sync, one of the main kind of like presences in Sync is based on an actual Glasgow urban legend. Is this blue van which drives around the streets of Glasgow, sort of like snatching people, and it's full of clowns. These kind of terrifying, grubby, dirty murder clowns will kidnap people and cut them up and turn them into clowns as well. And oh, hi Phil, how you doing?
What's up, Phil?
And yeah, like, so we had these terrifying kind of nightmare clowns. This was actually the first sequence that Alex drew as a kind of like a sample segment. Inspired by Mulholland Drive and the kind of man behind Winkies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like,
the next page is a little different.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, like, so that happened. So everyone like would walk past to see this kind of like comic with like clowns in it, and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm all into clowns because everything's going on," so they'd pick it up. And then 1 year later, the book launched in the direct market. In September 2017, and by sheer coincidence, we could not have planned this, but by sheer coincidence, the week that issue 1 dropped in comic shops was the same week that it released in cinemas. And we have this cover of like the big grubby clowns.
Right.
Like, Justin Butler again, really into clowns. Like, we have a clown-themed horror book. So and like 2017 New York Comic Con was madness because we had a kind of like little mini speculator boom for issue 1 of Sync, where we had a whole bunch of folk clamoring for variants and buying up, I was going and signing like 500 copies of like a special exclusive, like, cover that someone had commissioned, and it became this kind of real big buzz book for a little while. And I remember like at Thought Bubble that year in 2017, there was literally like, normally like as a, exhibitor at Thought Bubble, which is the big UK show, there's always like a big buzz book and a big buzz creator. So when you're at your table, you watch as the big lines form outside. Then when they open the doors, everyone runs past you to go to get the buzz book, and they go get what they want, and then they come back to you after that initial rush.
Right.
But that year, 2017, the line outside the door before rushing to the table was for Sync. Like,
Yeah.
Cool. Pretty cool.
And
Nice.
yeah, so there's a lot of like a mini sort of Sync hysteria, and for issue 1, Sync hysteria, yeah, that sinking feeling, and like then like the crazy thing was that sort of like interest in Sync wasn't just a kind of issue 1 and it was gone. The way it worked out, because of how strong interest in that book was, pre-order numbers for issue 4 ended up being higher than issue 1. Then issue 5 was the highest selling issue of like that first volume because the audience was growing. And then like, we managed to carry that audience over. And the way it worked out was we did Sync Volume 1 in 2017 going into 2018. Then we did Sync Volume 2. We launched at the end of 2018 going into 2019. The plan had then been we were going to take 2020 off to do the Crimson Cage, which we'll talk about later on, I'm sure. And then we were going to come back and do Sync Volume 3 in 2021. But then COVID happened, so Crimson Cage got pushed back to the end of 2021 into 2022. And then we couldn't start sort of like Sync until after that. So we released Dig this year, which is a kind of like OGN set in the Sync universe, telling the origin story of Mr. Dig, who is a kind of Fox Smash vigilante who walks around beating people up with a shovel. There we go, Dig. This tells his backstory, and we're currently working on Sync Volume 3. I'm getting pages in for that from Alex now, so that will hopefully be coming out in the next.
And that's coming along with Dig, and that's coming with Dig number 2 and 3, right? Right?
No, Dig's
right?
Yeah, but the story of Dig does continue in Sync Volume 3. Don't worry.
Sweet.
So yeah, that should hopefully be coming out in the coming months. So watch out for that. And one of the things that was there's a dickhead. The dickheads in Sync are this kind of gang of low-ranking thugs who wear condoms in their heads. They kind of like hazing ritual before they can rise the ranks. There's the clowns as well. There's the blue man clowns.
and
And
the
there's
man.
Mr. Dig himself. There he goes.
The
He's coming into
man.
focus. But yeah, like so yeah, like one of the things that was really gratifying is I was really worried. Like after that gap, like it was like between 2019 when Sync Issue 10 released and 2022 when Dig went to Kickstarter. That's 3 years. I was terrified that folk would have just lost interest and they'll given up caring about Sync, but the Dig Kickstarter ended up being hugely successful.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so one, it was amazing that readers still cared and were still passionate about Sync after all these years. But not only that, but readers who had jumped on board in the time since then. Let's say people who became fans of my work through Hotel or Mountainhead, then went back and read Sync. And so I was picking up fans even in its absence, which is really exciting. And I really hope those people will stay on board for Sync Volume 3 and beyond, because I think some of the stuff we have coming is really exciting. Some of my best stuff yet.
Yeah, Sync is exactly the book I like. So growing up, I was a huge fan of, Jinx and Goldfish and 100 Bullets and Stray Bullets, like crime-ish comics. And it kind of went away to like old pulp crime. And I like that, but I really wanted more Guy Ritchie and Quentin Tarantino crime.
Yeah, Brubaker took over.
Right. Brubaker was like, no, I like pulp, and I'll mix I'll give you a little bit of Cthulhu. You're welcome. I really just a little bit.
Yeah.
A little Cthulhu is a treat.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, nobody is ever going to say Brubaker can't write a crime story. I'm not going to say that at all. But the crime that I like is very Quentin Tarantino-esque, Guy Ritchie-esque, like
70s gritty.
Right.
Yeah.
So when Sync came to my being and it being horror and crime, because I didn't even think about it was crime until Tyler one time said, hey, you should talk to John Lees about his crime book, Sync. I was like, I've read that book, Tyler. It's not crime. It is about horror and clowns. Like, what are you talking about?
No, for me, that's what I think issue 1 is very horror heavy.
Yeah.
That's kind of a flip mode, which then becomes more of a crime. But I think that's one of the great things about Sync is because of that format, of it being a kind of anthology format almost, and telling different stories each issue is, it gives you the freedom to, once you've established the world of Sync Hill, you can do different genres within that world. Like you have horror issues, you have kind of like hard-boiled crime issues, you have action, kind of packed action thrillers, and you have like a romantic comedy in one of the issues. Like you have everything that can kind of go under the. I think it's a romantic comedy.
It's a romantic comedy, Todd.
Sure, it's a dark romantic comedy.
That's a happy ending.
Yes, there is a happy ending.
More ways than one. So for me, that's one of the great things about Sync is that you have the freedom to kind of do different things and flex different muscles and kind of explore different genres. And yeah, I think it's easy to kind of categorize it as horror because I'm kind of the horror guy.
Sure.
Oh yeah, this is a horror book, but I like it because it's all kinds of different genres, and I think probably principally crime.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to go to AWA stuff in a minute, but in between that, you did one of my favorite series. So I grew up in Rochester, New Hampshire, which is right next to Dover, New Hampshire, which is where those 4 beautiful turtles were made. So you got to write a short.
That's ready for yeah.
And Ninja Turtle, you're like, that's not where I thought you were going. You got to write a short in Tales of Demon, and you did not write a single Ninja Turtle in it, I think. Maybe there was a flashback in a second.
No, it was not. Michelangelo was in it.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, it was like a one-shot issue, right?
Yeah, so tell us about that.
No, the way it worked out was, I'd got to know Nick Pitara a little bit, because he was a big cheerleader for when Emily was gone. And they'd asked Nick to do a kind of story for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Universe, which was kind of spin-off series where you'd have stories outside the main. Well, it was in continuity, but it was outside the main storyline. Essentially, we could kind of expand the world and build up stuff. So they said, do you want to do a story, Nick? And he's like, I'll do it if John Lees can write it. And I'm sure IDW are like, who the fuck's John Lees?
Mountainhead. What?
You say that, but Joe Mulvey did one too. So I think they were targeting a comic strap.
So that came on board, and Nick was like, what do you want to do? We talked about a couple of we wanted to kind of introduce a character that hadn't been in the IDW, because the IDW Turtles series, like, you know, is really well done because it takes all these things like the animated series, the movies, the storyline, and it puts it into all this big cohesive kind of continuity, and it's really well done. And it was like, so we wanted to kind of like see if we could find something like that hadn't been used yet, and call it and invent it and put it into the world essentially. So we ended up looking. We found like Worm, who is this kind of giant tapeworm, who was an action figure who was deemed too frightening to be included in the animated series. He ended up showing up in the Archie comics at one point, but we thought we were going to do our version of him. So while the old version was a giant tapeworm, our version is multiple small tapeworms who kind of like come together, kind of hive consciousness to form like a big giant like worm. And I hope, like, what we were going for is like, we wanted to kind of make this feel like this was pre-synced. So what we were talking about was we wanted this to feel like a Turtles comic from the writer of An Emily Was Gone. We wanted this to be like the scariest, like, you know, like child-friendly Turtles comic that you can imagine. So yeah, like we have like, you know, it's this really dark kind of like pursuit story of like, you know, Michelangelo and the sewers investigating like missing people who've been getting snatched up by this creature. And obviously the Turtles like has all this, you know, like in general, but also particularly in the IDW series, have all these themes of family and like found family and community. And like Worm doesn't have any of that. Like Worm is his own family. Like, you know, he has everything he needs. And the way Nick drew him was, he has all these bits of junk and stuff that he collects onto himself as well, and becomes part of this mass as like a hoarder. And for me, I wanted to do like, you know, it's like the crocodile in Peter Pan, you know, with the tick, 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 like, you know, like, you know, we incorporated like something like a kind of device akin to that into like, you know, the book as well. But instead of like the tick, 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 because you don't have sounds in comics, you had this red balloon, which is tied on him, which is floating around when he's near. And yeah, it was a really fun issue to do. And the great thing is that we did that issue, we did one and done, and that was it. But every so often, like, you know, I'll see, like, you know, in a Turtles message board or whatever, let's say, like, there's some new storyline and there's, like, some mystery villain who's been introduced to whatever. Folk will be like, oh, I wonder if it's Worm coming back. Like, you know, we introduce someone into the continuity, and then other writers can, like, pick them up and use them if they want, which I think is really cool to kind of contribute to that tapestry. Is a Scottish accent you're hearing?
Yeah, Andy Scottish. All right, good to know. Yeah, I hunted that down after I heard about it. I was like, oh, John Lees wrote Ninja Turtles. I have to hunt this down. And then Mulvey wrote it. I said, no, Richard Mulvey wrote one, right? Or Richard Dueck.
Oh no, you've brundled.
I've got them all together. I've got 5 names together.
Yeah,
Rich
Dueck is a writer.
Rich Dueck, yes,
is an artist who Rich Dueck often works with. As I say, you've kind of like merged them into one.
They're one people. They're one people.
They're like the worm. They're family.
They've been wormed. Rich Dueck is who you're thinking of. He wrote a story for Turtles as well, which was a very good one. He's a great writer.
Also,
I'm a big fan of Rich and a good friend of his as well.
He has some good IDW stuff too.
He does indeed.
We've had him on, and I love him. Which, speaking of IDW stuff,
let's talk about it.
Along with Turtles, before we move over to AWA, because I'm going to spend most of my time wanting to talk to you about the AWA stuff.
But yeah, like Turtles was kind of like gateway into doing Mountainhead. Like the way that started off was I'm a big fan of Ryan Lee. I think he's an amazing artist. I think he's a genius.
Yeah.
Like you look at his stuff and like it's like nothing else, you know, out there. And I remember I met him for the first time at C2E2 in Chicago in 2016. And I was meeting him, I was thinking, I would love to work with Ryan, like, you know, but I bet he's too busy. And it was Ryan who then, like, so when I met him for the first time, Ryan said to me, we have to come up with something to work on together, like, you know, like, come up with something for me. Like, and I was like, yes, because I was about to have to ask him, you know, that he's asked me first. You know, that's great, I can play it cool. But if you think so, Ryan, if you're sure. Yes, we had a few, I suppose, so twist my arm. But, like, you know, so I came up with a couple of ideas, and the one that really stuck was Mountainhead. And like for years, I'd had this kind of like hook for a story in my head, which was informed by various like, you know, real life stories, like the story of like Stephen Stainer, who was this missing kid in the 1980s, you know, or like that documentary, the Chino, is it called The Chain? No, is it The Changeling? No, The Imposter. That's what it's called. Like, which is like, I'd done another documentary about a missing kid, and so I had these real life stories rolling around in my head, and that kind of like gave me this hook of this character, Abraham Stubbs, who's this kid who spent his whole life on the run, looking over his shoulder, living off the grid, with this kind of like crazy conspiracy obsessed dad being told that the authorities are after them and they want to steal him away and brainwash him, until eventually they're caught, and Abraham finds out that his dad's not his dad. Actually, he's been like, kidnapped when he was an infant, and he's sent back to live with his real family, who he doesn't know, in an old hometown that he can't remember. And that was kind of like the hook that I had, but I never knew where the story was going to go from there. And then through talking with Ryan, I ended up had like a really great like story concept and a kind of like great conceit, but not a character hook. So then I kind of like put these two ideas together. So you end up having this story that, without spoiling it for anyone who's not read it, you have this real character-driven thing that's really kind of focused on this kid who's traumatized, and he's put in a new world that he's trying to get to grips with, and the things don't feel right, and people seem strange to him, and he's not sure if something's wrong or if it's just his own programmed paranoia. But then the story takes kind of unhinged turn, like in issue 3, and becomes like something totally different. And that's a really hard sell. Yeah. And that's a really hard sell. Like, fair play to IDW. It's hard to try and pitch like this is going to be one thing and then it becomes something else like midway through. But they believed in the book and they kind of like saw it through. And yeah, like, I think Mountainhead's
it's 5 issues, right?
Yeah, 5 issues. Mountainhead's one of these books
that... If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. It's great. And it's 5 issues. Little commitment.
I'm really proud of. And it's funny because I think it's going to be a book that's only slowly building up an audience among my work, because the way it worked out, I think it was issue 1 and 2 came out, then the pandemic hit, and then it was like about a year absence between issues, which really killed us. But
it was a big gap.
But once it was all collected, I think people have started going back to it and discovering it. And I think it's a really cool book. I'm really pleased with. I think it has some of my scariest moments that I've had in any book in that. But I think it's also quite funny and character-driven and dramatic. And me and Ryan still talking about doing something else together, because we had so much fun working on this. So watch this space.
Yeah, please do. I remember reading it and being like, what is going on with the people from Comics Tribe? Because we had Road of Bones at the same time, and with the same company, I was like, what are they afraid of in the mountains? Like, did they have a
Comics Tribe retreat you don't talk about?
Yeah, there was a Comics Tribe retreat. There's a mountain retreat where they don't.
That went terribly wrong,
or terribly right.
Yeah, one of the two. It could be both.
I mean, it got you both some really cool books, so I'm happy with the results regardless.
So good.
But yeah, I think it's
IDW. You had some good stuff, but how I may have not been early for Comics Tribe. I may have been in my own bubble of other indie things, but in terms of upper indie, I first found out about you doing Comic Burrito. And
I just quite like that little almost she held up the
that's the noise for when I introduce a book, obviously. I was on a live stream for Comic Burrito and someone randomly went, "Hey, you should really read Hotel if you like horror books." This is volume 2. This didn't come out then. But volume 1 did. And thank you, Nat. I'll always be eternally grateful for you recommending this book. And then
I was going to ask, was it me?
is Nat. And she was just like, "This is my favorite book right now. You should read it." And I was like, okay, cool. And then I saw it was like $9.99 to grab it for the first volume. I'm like, I'm for sure going to read it. And then I read it and went, that could have been $21.99 and I would have been pleased.
Damn it, I should have known that. We should have been
yeah. You tell AWA next time.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Yes. It was Comic Burrito's #1 horror book. That when we did our countdown, it got a golden burrito for I believe best story, best short or something, one of those. It's been a while. It's been a pandemic since then. Yeah.
And thanks for supporting it in the store.
Danny Morales is he runs a store in Orlando called The Collective. Does a lot of indie stuff and loves it. So
Yeah,
Thank you very
these
much.
two books are incredible, and I adore them. I've been outspoken about that for a while now. What was where did this come from? I obviously because this was a different creative team for you too, right?
Yeah,
When this
that was
started.
this was a whole different process. Like, for me, um, like, but the way Hotel started was, I'd actually started with, I was like, Axel Alonso followed me on Twitter, and originally I thought it was like a joke account, and it was like pretending to be Axel Alonso. I looked back and it actually was Axel Alonso, so like I followed him back, thinking, oh, that's cool. And then like a short while later, he kind of DM'd me, and he's like, sort of like said that he was a big fan of Sync, and would I want to have a conversation about possibly working together on something. This was before AWA been announced or anything like that. So I said, like, no, that'd be cool. I said, I'm away to New York for New York Comic Con, but when I'm back home, we can maybe have a Skype call. And he's like, I'm going to New York Comic Con as well. We could meet up. So I ended up that year, I think that was 2018, and that year I had my most important meeting, like, of the week before the convention even started. Like, I think it was on like the Tuesday, and like Axel took me to lunch, and it was like a particularly like roasting day. Like, for whatever reason that year, like October, like was roasting hot, especially for a Scotsman. Like, it was like really hot. Like, so I was out and walking around, and I was a sweating pig. So I had to kind of rush back for a quick change, so I wasn't like I didn't like I wasn't like I was nerves from like me next.
Just flop
like,
sweating. Hi.
so like I went back. So I went like then we went to dinner or lunch, and like he was telling me about like that they're launching a new publisher and they're looking for exciting new creators, blah blah blah. He said that like he really loved Sync, and he's like, so he was talking like about any pictures you have, send them to us, or like come up with something new for us. We want to come up with something like for you to work on, and this was a totally different experience for me. Like in terms of normally what happens is I'll come up with but what used to happen was I would come up with a pitch on my own. I'd get a creative team together, we'd make the comic or make pitch pages, and then we'd desperately try and like harass some publisher to try and like put it out for us. And normally what would happen is every publisher would ignore us or say no, and then like Comics Tribe would publish us. And Tyler's open about that. Tyler's always said like go to every other publisher first. If no one else will take you that real publisher,
just come home.
Bring it here.
Yeah,
Just
come
get
home.
over here. Big hug. We got you.
But like like what and like and it's like for me it was actually the point where when people started saying no to me, I felt I was making progress. Like they actually care enough about me, they're actually going to reply and tell me to piss off.
Ooh,
but like
that's nice.
but for me it's like this is a kind of analogy I've given a lot, so forgive me. I think I may have given it to you already, Todd. Like but I'll say it again just in case. Like but for me, like making comics is like having a baby. Where like you love it, you take a part of yourself and you put it into something new, and like you're proud of it and you want the best for it, like and it's like you share everything. Pitching a comic is like taking that baby and putting it in a hamster ball and rolling it onto the motorway and hoping it makes it to the other side intact.
You can make it.
Yeah, and so it's such a demoralizing process, like trying to kind of like email people or hustle and go, hi, you don't know me, but here's my story, publish it. So AWA this was the first for us where we were like, no, we're coming to you and we want you to make a book for us. So this was quite exciting for me. And it was like I didn't have to kind of like find an artist, I just had to kind of like write up a Word document essentially. And like I was trying to do my best shot. And I thought I was like pure like like picking up bits of conversation that we had with Axel. And Axel had said he would like to see like another anthology type thing because he loved the anthology format of Sync. He said he'd love something with the setting of like an old roadside hotel. And he was actually thinking like a kind of noir thing, like some kind of like but my mind immediately went to horror, like as a kind of setting. I was thinking of the Bates Motel and like that kind of stuff. And the third thing he said is like it'd be great if you could put a clown in it again. And I was thinking, fuck clowns! The last thing I want to do is another story with fucking clowns.
I love it.
But like, you
I
know,
like that you basically went like, okay, and then put him in like the
that was a
least
challenge.
clown way possible. I
That was
love
a
it.
challenge. I thought, well, how can I do a clown that's as different as possible to the clowns of Sync? So I ended up kind of like
Right.
doing like looking into like Commedia dell'arte, like Italian like
Right.
you know theatre, and like you know
Yep.
their clown archetype, and doing some kind of thing there with the Piero, and that kind of became that.
So
And
good.
hotel. Well, I put together this picture of this old roadside hotel. And the idea was it was like officially it doesn't exist. You won't find it in any map, but if you're traveling like alone down Route 66 and you're truly desperate for sanctuary or secrecy, perhaps you'll find a sign on the road saying next exit on the left. And like so, like the idea was going to be that each chapter of the comic would be like the story of a different room. And it was going to be like a Rashomon type thing where, like, you know, it's like a one big story, but you're seeing different snippets of it from different perspectives, and it all comes together. So I put together this pitch, and it was all ready to go, and it had the money title of Next Exit, No Vacancy. So I sent that to AWA, and Axel's like, I like it, but it needs a kind of like snappier title, and it was Axel who came up with Hotel with 2 M.
Oh, thank goodness! Thank goodness!
And then, like, you know,
that's great.
And the idea of like the kind of like, you know, the light up, you know, sign, you know, and he was the one that said that. I see the logo now, the light up sign. It's like neon lighters, and the O and the T have been blanked out, so it says hell. And then like I came up with, and I riffed on that and came up with the idea of having like, you know, like in the comic, like, you know, you have like the hotel. Then the second L is like an arrow pointing left, like, you know, so it's like the next exit, you know, the left kind of type thing. And yeah, from there, like, you know, we did the first volume. And the great thing was, like I say, I was just me, a writer by myself. I didn't have to find the team. You know, it was Axel kind of matching up with our AWA, matching up with everybody. They found Dalibor Talic, you know, who'd done all these big books like, you know, Deadpool and like, you know, all that stuff. And then, like, you know, these veteran colorists and letters like Lee Lowridge and
Lee
Sal
Lowridge is so
Cipriano.
good.
And so I was like, everybody in that team was like legit and had Marvel, DC credits apart from me. I was like the unknown commodity there, and I was like, you know, I better not fuck this up because like, these guys are all legit. So we were kind of kept separate originally. Like I wrote the scripts, and then like they brought the artists on board, and like, you know, so we're all kind of segmented apart from each other. But then, like, I met Dalibor for the first time at New York Comic Con 2019, and we hit it off immediately. And that was great, kind of getting to know him, and then that kind of like meant that I knew for any future issues, we would be able to. Oh, hi George. How you doing? But I thought for any future issues we do, I'll now be able to write to Dalibor. Like, you know, I know his style, and I'll be able to ask him, what do you want to draw? And we can kind of like work together rather than just be me writing and then him drawing. So yeah, the way it worked out, everything was going to go great. A Hotel was going to be one of the launch titles for AWA Studios. This big, massive event, big product lineup launch. It was me, The Resistance, Archangel 8, and the Devil's Highway. And the plan was going to be a big, massive launch week. There was going to be transatlantic signings. I was doing a signing for Forbidden Planet Glasgow. There was going to be multiple signings across the US. There was going to be this big event. And then COVID happened. And literally the week that those books were supposed to launch was the week that all the comic shops shut down. And so we thought, my God, we're good. But no, like what ended up, we still found an audience. AWA did some inventive things like putting the books online and releasing them as web comics and serializing.
Yeah, it's a web comic. Yeah, that's how I first read it.
That's the way it kind of first picked up, and then like you know, like people were still ordering comic shops, you know, people were still ordering from comic shops for mail order and stuff. And we found an audience, and then by the time it got to the kind of first volume, you know, graphic novel, Hotel was one of like the top 10 best-selling graphic novels of October that month, you know, which is like unheard of, like for me, like, you know, like to have sales that level. And then based on that, and based on like readers, like, you know, like tagging me and tagging like AWA and the demand for more, we then got to do a volume 2. And yes, like for me, it's funny because
5 issues.
Yeah, 5. We get bumped up to 5 issues. But it's funny because for me, like, you know, obviously, I love all of the comics to do it. I've never written anything thinking like, oh, I'm just doing this like for the sake of doing it.
For the money.
I can't write something unless like I have that kind of tether where I care about it and I feel like this is something I'm passionate about. But even so, I was taken by surprise by just how much folk loved Hotel. People really respond to that book. We really enjoy it, and the audience is still at up. I've actually been getting asked will we see a volume 3 quite often lately, and the answer to that is I've written out the synopsis for volume 3. I've talked to Dalibor about it. I'm on board to do it. Dalibor's on board to do it, but it's up to AWA, and essentially they're in the same position they were in, at the end of volume 1 before volume 2, where when we finished volume 1, they said like, write it in a way that this can be the end, but if there's interest, we'll do more. And because of interest and because people were outspoken and wanted more, the demand was there to get a volume 2. So if the interest is there and the demand's still there, people make their voices heard, we will get a volume 3 hopefully. And obviously, hopefully, all this stuff with the Hotel film coming up might, mean that we're getting.
It's gotta help. I don't know how that can't help.
Well, for me, you were such a big component for me to like embrace AWA. Obviously, Straczynski, you're gonna read Straczynski. If you're an old school guy like me in his 40s, you're gonna read anything Straczynski and try it out. But I bought the whole line. I was all in. I bought every single series. I only dropped one of the AWA series, and that was Archangel 8. I'm sorry. I was
going to say, don't say which one, but
I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. If you're watching this AWA, I dropped it because I felt like it was the Punisher Angel storyline. Like someone was trying to rewrite when Punisher became an angel. Nobody liked it the first time. But everything else.
I think it was good.
All right. Well, I didn't read it.
Company line.
Michael Ricci's a great writer.
Right,
I think it was good.
All I'm saying is everything that I read got volumes 2. Like Devil's Highway got Devil's number 2. The second volume just finished up. Love that. Love your volume 2.
I just wish there was more of the Resistance out there.
Yeah, I'm sure that that's more coming. I mean, they're always working on expanding that universe.
Yeah. No, it's a wild. Like the whole company policy is so wild, right? Like it's creator owned, but it's not creator owned. Like it's crazy. Like I love what they're doing over there. And even like I remember going to a comic shop the other day, and I was like, "Oh, you have the Upshot magazine version of this in black and white." I was like, "What the hell is this?" So I bought it. Because your stuff was in it, so that was kind of cool.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, like I loved Hotel. I thought it was great. It definitely get that itch. If you were reading Sync and you haven't read Hotel, it'll fix that. It'll give you that it'll give you that itch. It'll fix that itch until you get more Sync.
But it's a totally different story.
It's totally different. But
if the edge persists, apply the ointment of Hotel to the Sync affected area.
Yes,
well, and what I love, as someone who, again, you and I are both love films because you talk about films all the time. That whole like archetype of like a 4 rooms, we're tying it all together. At the end, Four Rooms isn't even the best example of that. It's just the first one that came in my head.
The easiest example of it, though. It's the one that most people will understand.
Right. Where, all these things tie together. They're part of a bigger audience you don't know. Barbarian just recently did it. That's kind of a thing where it all ties. Just watch the whole thing.
But then they work individually, too. You don't need to know the other stuff to enjoy the one issue, which is why it's great.
That's why I love writing in that format. I love doing the kind of one-shot / anthology model because, like you say, it means that you can pick up any issue, and you can, obviously, there's like a bigger story there, but you can pick up any issue and you can enjoy it. And for me, this is a kind of real hurdle that I think creator-owned comics struggle with, probably more than superhero comics. I think superhero comics, let's say I remember, when I was wanting to get back into reading Marvel, in 2010, I just walked into the comic shop and what's the latest issue of Thor?
Yeah. And it was because you already know Thor as a character. It doesn't matter.
What's the latest issue of Daredevil? And it was Ed Baker's Daredevil at the time, but
and he's going to be blind, fighting crime, has sonar. You already know the character.
Yeah, but with creator-owned comics, it's like you get issue 1, and if you miss issue 1, it's like, well, I guess I'll wait for the trade or just never read it.
Yep.
And I wanted to kind of, and I like to try and fight that, like, you know, where with like hotel or sync, like, you know, I like the idea of someone can have heard good things about a hotel, and they can walk into the shop and they can pick up like sync issue 4
Yep.
or hotel issue 3,
Right.
you know, and maybe they'll
Three's
want to go
great.
back and
That's a
read the
good
rest
one.
of the series, but they can pick up that comic and they'll have a good experience with it just reading that comic. And that was kind
That's
of like
how we kept pushing it for the whole like pandemic. We were like, any random issue of Hotel you find, literally just grab it. It doesn't matter. Just get it.
Because I do think, like, you know, that's something that's quite important to me. Even it's something I try and carry over, even in, like, you know, my more serialized stories where you need to read the whole thing. Like, where I think that, you know, each comic should be a worthwhile product in itself, whether it be a standalone story or as a meaty chapter of it, because like people are paying money for that book, so it has to be worthwhile as an entity in its own right.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, you know, Hotel, I don't want to go too much into it because I want spoiler treasures, but like you threw me for a whole loop. I was like, I think the Hotel's good. Oh wait, no, it's not good. No, it's good. Like I think it could be good. Maybe
it might matter about who you are and if you're
right.
I mean, honestly, like, you know, I won't go too far in it because, like I said, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. But for me, like, I almost feel like the Hotel's like too cuddly now by the end of season 2. Like, I want to make it really nasty again. So that's that's the direction I'm going to go come volume 3.
I like that. It felt like it had a personality because you're like, first when you're like, it don't give a fuck who you are. You're just sorry, buddy. Sucks to suck. And the second one, it's interesting. I like that it's different and it's fickle. And
well, the way we talk about it is the way the hotel works, the way Pierrot Courts works is when you go there, when you're drawn there or you're brought there, you're presented with a test. Like, you know, you have to confront your own demon, right. And either you'll pass that test or you'll fail that test. And that doesn't necessarily mean often that can mean, like, you know, it's some horrible bastard who gets his comeuppance, you know, because he's failed the test, you know. But sometimes you can be a good person, like, you know,
right.
but you still can't overcome your demons. Like, again, without
like when you're not like the perfect dad and you're just like not the best dad. Yeah. I'm like, man.
The example that I give is issue 3 of Hotel, which is probably still like the scariest thing I've ever written. This is about like a kind of woman who's searching for her missing sister, who was supposedly abducted by a serial killer, and both the sister and the serial killer were both last seen at this hotel and both went missing. Like, you know, this hotel doesn't exist, so she's been looking for it for years. And when she finds this hotel, quite early on in the story, there's this point where she goes to leave. And the lesson would be that, you know, she can't stop living for her sister. She has to move on. So she goes to leave and she trips up in a loose kind of like, you know, sort of like slab in the ground. And she sees like this passageway leading to a trapdoor underground. And she's standing there. She can either go out the door or she can go down this trapdoor.
So good.
And whatever happens after that, the fact that she's chosen to go down the trapdoor is she's made her choice and she's already lost before entering because she's already done that. And so that's kind of like the idea that I have in my head, that everybody that goes there is given some kind of test. And maybe it's not a fair test and it doesn't feel fair to a human.
Sometimes it's real mean.
But so maybe like by a human level it might feel petty or unfair or cruel, but in the grand scheme of things, like, it's fair.
It's such a good book. But let's answer George's question and then we'll go. I don't know if you even know the answer to George's question, but
honestly, I should say I'm not being coy. I'm not like doing I'm the secret. I genuinely don't know. Right now, all I know, I'm just kind of like pretty much an excited observer at this stage. I know that Elle Callahan is writing and directing it. I know that she's working on the script. Elle Callahan is a talented filmmaker who made a movie called Headcount, which I believe is on Shudder still. Worth watching. It's really fun. And I know she's working on the script. I know it's based on, like, you know, the world of Hotel and, like, you know, it's like set in the same. I don't know, like, if it's going to be adapting my stories or riffing on different stories. You know, it's a rom-com. You know, but like, so for me, like, but I don't really mind that much. Like, for me, like, I don't want it just to be like a word for word translation of like what's in the
Right.
page, because that's not interesting. I think for me, it's quite cool to see like someone new come in and be like, well, I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to do my own spin on it. And the good
Yeah.
thing about Hotel is the very nature of the series means that you can do any kind of number of
Mhm.
stories, like
Anything.
and they can work as their own thing, and the comic can work as its own thing. So yeah, I'm excited
Yep.
to see what happens, and like hopefully like as it develops, I'll hopefully find out more and kind of find out more about the process. But right now, whatever happens, I'm excited to see where it goes.
If it's so far off the reservation, you can just say it was like decades later. The hotel changed, and it's just like, it's just how it goes.
Now, I hope it goes completely in a different direction, and then you're forced to write the adaptation. Like the old school like adaptation.
John Lee's rendition of Hotel the film.
You have to pivot to all the musical numbers that were watching.
Yes.
Right, so you have to bring it back in the movie adaptation of the thing you wrote.
Yeah.
I would love to have a musical issue, please. That would be fantastic.
I'm starring Gerard Butler, so it'll be great. It'll be just
fat Gerard Butler.
Yeah, fat Gerard Butler, not ripped.
Oh, I was like fit as.
Gerard Butler's just looking healthy and well fed,
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Hey, I love it. I love a guy who's just like, nope, I'm not doing those type of movies right now. I'm good. I'm gonna eat chicken.
That's why I like off-season Vin Diesel. I'm just like, that dude can get it.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Just cuddling.
So let's talk about your love of wrestling and one of your dream books. This book is I follow your newsletter. John, by the way, if you don't follow John Lee's newsletter, please do. It's fantastic. Your pal John Lee.
Idiots.
He tells you all sorts of stuff. But yeah, tell us about Crimson Cage.
Yeah, so the Crimson Cage is right from the earliest days of my comic career. I go back to the Standard Times. I had the idea in my head that I wanted to do like a comic set in the world of like 1980s territory pro wrestling. I think it's a fascinating kind of like postcard of American history and American culture, and I just love wrestling. I've always loved wrestling since I was a little kid, and I wanted like a wrestling story, but I kind of filed it away as like a one-day thing, like because I didn't have like a story yet. Like I knew I had the setting, but didn't have the story to go inside that setting. Fast forward to like 2015, and I watched Justin Kurzel's movie adaptation of Macbeth with Michael Fassbender, and shortly after, and like watching that, I really enjoyed it. And it kind of like revived like my old like school days where I loved Macbeth. And I mean, all the other kids hated Shakespeare, and I just couldn't wait to like read more Macbeth. I loved it. But then about a year later, I watched not Game of Thrones, Throne of Blood, by Akira Kurosawa, which is now one of my favorite movies. I love it, and I was watching that thinking that's so genius. I love how they took Macbeth, the core story of Macbeth, and transplanted it to the world of feudal Japan and samurais. Like they're so clever. If I was doing like my version of Macbeth, what kind of place would that translate it to? And I was like, oh my god, this wrestling thing I've always had, and I clicked it together. I was like, oh my, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought this just works. It's just like it's natural. It's like peanut butter and jam. Like it's just peanut butter and jelly. Sorry, I forget it's American.
Well, yeah, I know it's not jelly there. It's Jello basically. What you get?
No, it's jam. We call it, but,
yeah, because jelly is Jello to you, correct?
Yeah, jelly's Jello.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, like gel. But yeah, so like I had this idea, and then like, and the way it worked out was, I was in conversation with a publisher, not AWA at the time. I was in conversation with a publisher, and it was like, and it was like they'd said before Alex was attached to anything, it was just me, and they went like, you could do any comic, like what would you pitch? And then like this came in my head, this is when that came in my head, like I'll shoot my shot, and I pitched Crimson Cage. They ended up passing on it, but the idea didn't go away. And so I was talking to Alex about it at New York Comic Con, would have been New York Comic Con 2017. And he's like, well, we should just do it. And I was like, well, we're already doing sync, and he's like, I can do them both, because Alex is a machine. So 2018, we started prepping the pitch document for it. We brought on Ashley Cormack, came on board as the colorist. That's Alex's wife, and Hassan Otsman Elhow.
Fantastic job, my goodness.
Yeah, the band they work great together.
They're great.
And then like
Gorgeous.
I brought in Hassan as like the letterer, and then Hassan put together this amazing pitch package, which was like it was all designed as kind of an old kind of like wrestling program. And like and that did a big that was a big part of how we sold this book, was how good that pitch document looked. So eventually we had this pitch document put together, and then Hotel like was just starting to take off. So I pitched Crimson Cage to AWA, and they were like, "Yes, let's do this." And so it's over 2019. They kind of like we tinkered with the format a little bit to kind of like fit it in with what AWA was looking for. We had some contract discussions and stuff, and then in February 2020, we signed the contract at last, and it was like, this is finally happening. So I messaged Alex to celebrate, and I was like, Alex, I know it's been a lot of delays, been a lot of heartache, a lot of disappointment, a lot of setbacks, but now I can proudly say that unless society as we know it falls apart, the Crimson Cage is coming out in 2020. 3 weeks later, everyone was locked down, the comics industry ground to a halt. And then the Crimson Cage was in limbo. And the reason we couldn't do sync was we were essentially in a holding pattern. We were told we could be ready to start work on the Crimson Cage at any point now, but we don't know when. So you have to be ready. So we couldn't start working on sync. And we ended up holding off until like it was like December 2020 when we were finally like, okay, we can start work again. And so then we like, things resumed and we worked, and then like, so we spent 2021 developing the book, and then eventually it released in December 2021. And weirdly enough, it came out the same month as another like comic Beth adaptation from the Coen brother, from Joe Coen, starring Denzel Washington, my favourite actor, and like Frances McDormand, one of my favourite actresses. I was like, my God, so this is like tough act to try and follow or try and beat. So then like, so like, just this book even getting released was in itself a triumph for me, because this is something I've had in my head for years. It's my dream project. I thought when I wrote it, I think this is the best thing I've written. And so even getting the book out at all, like, in any format is like a triumph for me. Like, it feels like a real achievement. And like, I'm not sure if you can see in the camera here, but I have on my wall the frame up.
There you go.
Chuck Frenzy drawn by Alex, and I have a shelf like which has the single issues of the Crimson Cage, my original high school copy of Macbeth,
amazing,
nice,
and like a replica title I had commissioned that says Chuck Frenzy.
Big gold.
And so
that's amazing.
That in itself was like an achievement, and the fact that then folk really responded to it and really loved it, and it became a really popular book, and folks said it was one of their favourites of 2022, and it got great reviews. Like, that is even better. That folk really resonated with people. I realise I talked a lot about the Crimson Cage and I haven't actually said the plot. The Crimson Cage and a retail.
You kind of said it.
Yeah,
Macbeth and wrestling. That's the plot.
Yeah, the Crimson Cage is a retail. William Shakespeare's Macbeth, set against the backdrop of 1980s territory pro wrestling. It's about Chuck Frenzy, who is a sort of like main event star of a small Louisiana promotion, like a beloved local hero, but a big fish in a small pond. He encounters these supernatural beings in the bayou who tell him he is destined to become the next world champion if he's willing to do something terrible to achieve it. And then things go in a suitably violent.
He ignores them, and it becomes a rom-com. It has all your It's fantastic, and it was coming out when Hotel Volume 2 was coming out.
Yeah, what like it was like they both
because it was Lee December for a second there. There is
they both launched in December, Lee's December, and then literally like
come out for the Kickstarter.
No, that came out a bit later. The Kickstarter was running at the same time, I think. That's
later
in the year, but the way it was working out for all 5 issues of both Hotel and Crimson Cage, it was like 1 week was Hotel and the next week it was Crimson Cage. It was like
I kept having Lees like every week, and then a break, and then a lot of Lees. It was great.
Yep. and then obviously like things didn't work out, like but I was hoping I would have like Lees everywhere, like for the first half of the year, and then I was going to have like a couple of other books the second half of the year, but it didn't work out. I just saw George's thing about the monologues. The way that works out is the funny thing was, like, obviously a big part of Macbeth is like the soliloquies where like characters will like step outside of the drama and talk directly to the audience and be like, this is what's happening now, I'm going to kill the king, don't tell anybody. And like, so and I thought, how do you recreate that? Like, because it's such an important part of the identity of like these sort of Shakespearean tragedies. So how do you kind of create that in a wrestling format? And what is a soliloquy if not a promo cut?
It's a promo. It's perfect.
So I thought, I give these characters a microphone. They're talking directly to the audience, and they're cutting a promo. Cutting they kind of like backdrop, and they're doing their innermost thoughts. And I thought it was a kind of really fun device that and I'm really glad that we got a chance to do it.
Yeah, it's like you would do it. It's already something that you could have just come up with without it being something that you were trying to search from the base material.
Yeah,
like it just seems natural because it's like, what wrestling show doesn't have what wrestling show doesn't start with a promo or something? Like it very rarely starts with action. You start listening to somebody talk.
Yeah, with somebody talking with the microphone direct
and then
camera.
It goes, yeah. So it's just like, of course, and it's just it's so perfect. And then they're good too. It's just like, oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and a big part of that, like, obviously, we have the promos, but also like one of the things I really wanted to capture was I really wanted kind of this to feel like you were getting wrestling action, and the action was integral to the story. Like it wasn't just because sometimes you read wrestling comics and it's like you have the story and the plot, and then the story stops on a page. You can have a couple like wrestling moves and montage, and the story picks up again. I wanted one to try and make the wrestling feel immersive and integral to the story. And and also make it feel like the atmosphere of a wrestling match, and try and capture that pace and drama, and really make it feel like people like they're part of the show. And Alex did a great job of doing that and kind of capturing that wrestling vibe.
And like the talking during and things like that. It's just so good. I love that. Like, it doesn't stop.
Something that didn't come from me, it came from Alex. But Alex said the way he drew it is whenever he placed like the POV from within the audience and the kind of like the camera, whatever you call it, in the crowd looking at the ring from the outside, those moments we're watching like the story, we're watching like the wrestling match play out, like Chuck French,
the highlight,
Abominable Grunt, like the villain. We're watching like the story as the audience means to see.
Whenever
it's like wrestlers talking to each other, saying, "I'm going to do this move and you're going to do that," you always brought the kind of like POV camera inside the ring. It's like we've become one of the performers, and we're like,
right there,
step behind the curtain, like we're watching it.
And the
webcam. So you can see that, like the way it pans out. Like
that's really cool. That's a really good idea. I'm gonna. I was already going to reread it soon, and
good.
It'll be a nice little nugget while reading.
Yeah, I think it's fun to go back and read it with that in mind.
Yeah, I think what I loved about, the Crimson Cage is the wrestling mattered. So it felt like a WWE program or whatever. The wrestling in the ring, where I've read other wrestling books where the matches are like filler, like they're not integral to the party unless someone's going to hurt somebody, right?
Yeah.
But where every one of yours is just going along, almost like it's a separate thing. If you didn't know Macbeth was part of, like it's this is just the storyline. Like
for me, like that's something like for me, like when I was writing this book, what I wanted was I wanted that if you didn't like wrestling, you could still read this and enjoy it just as like a thriller or whatever. Right. But just as much as that, if you didn't know Macbeth, didn't care about Macbeth, you could just read this as a story without knowing like the Macbeth story. And that was like, so I wanted to make it feel accessible to everybody. So that's what was, not everybody, not small children, obviously, but
sure.
But accessible.
My 8-year-old did not appreciate it.
Yeah, my son keeps asking for Spidey and His Amazing Friends instead of Crimson Cage, but I pitch it to him every night.
Every night you're just like, Crimson Cage.
I do know, that like Alex's like young son, like Danny, like I think he's maybe about 2-3 years old now. Like he loved the Crimson Cage apparently. And Alex came to Thought Bubble this year, and he brought Ashley along with them, and they brought like Danny. And like Danny's like while we're at the table, Danny's coming up to Alex and handing him like a picture he's drawn of like a blood covered Mr. Dick, and like like.
Look at this!
That's Mr. Dick, Daddy.
He's like sticking the shovel in someone's head.
Like corrupting the youth.
I love it. That's great.
The good thing is,
so-
if I got now, I can fire Alex and hire his son instead.
Yeah, you're all set. You just get the next Cormac.
Yeah.
You just have a long. It's very Macbeth
Assembly
how
line,
you treat your artists.
Yeah.
Well, Cormac's writing everything these days, drawing everything these days. I find him on all sorts of stuff. I get, what is it?
So good.
What is the name? I can't even. The Duel. The Duel was randomly. I was like,
Yeah. No,
Alex is doing that.
Yeah, he
He's
does
a
a whole
machine,
bunch of
apparently.
books. Like, he's a machine, like you say. He does, like, Sync.
Yeah.
He does the stuff with Rich Duick. Like, I think he does every book for Bliss on Tap.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Oh,
It worked.
That's good to know. Like, I'm glad,
Oh,
like,
good.
that you were
There
able
we
to enjoy
go.
it, George, like, even without seeing any of it. Although you haven't said that, you should now go and check out some other adaptations. Throne of
you
Blood
really
is
should.
amazing. You should check it out.
It's really good.
So we got your newest book to talk about before we wrap this up. So we've got the
yes,
new thing.
The Nasty. Now, I said that the Crimson Cage is a passion project of mine. It's like sort of a topic that I love more than just about anything else in pro wrestling. But something that I'm equally passionate about and that I love just as much as wrestling and have loved for just as long as wrestling is horror. And this is like a total love letter to horror. It's not quite like, even though like obviously there's horror elements in it, for me I look at it as more of a kind of like a comedy coming of age type story. And it's going to weirdly enough, it's probably my most personal thing that I've ever written. Because yes, Throne of Blood, George, that's the title. but like, weirdly enough, like Nasty's like the most personal thing that I've ever written, because like it's set in Rutherglen, which is like where I grew up as a kid. And like, it's very much like a lot of my own backstory and my own love of horror kind of like filtered into this story. The premise is this kid Thumper, he's called, because he has like a nervous habit of like tapping his foot, so he's called Thumper. Thumper Connell is like a lonely kid who, when he was young, decided to kind of like make the star of his favourite slasher movie into his imaginary friend. Because he was watching like horror movies like a very young age, like me. I had a very permissive video shop like in my town where it was at the end of my street, and I was able to, like, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I could just like walk to this video shop and pick up like I'd come home with a copy of like Peter Pan and like Child's Play 2 and like Maniac Cop 3 Badge of Silence, so,
the usual combo.
So I was watching like horror movies from a very young age, and while I never had an imaginary friend, I did often daydream about how cool it would be if like Michael Myers was my pal. So that's like where like this idea of like this kid making up an imaginary friend, like of his favourite slasher. But unlike most kids, like Thumper kept his imaginary friend all through his childhood and into his teenage years. So our story picks up in 1994 against the backdrop of the waning days of the Video Nasties Moral Panic. And the Video Nasties, here I'll explain it to you, Phil. The title of the Nasty comes from, here in the UK, one of the most fascinating periods of like cultural history is the whole moral panic that surrounded Video Nasties, where in the 1980s, and the influx of like VHS and unrated films were kind of coming out, the Tory government, which is the right-wing conservative government, were looking for like a good bogeyman to kind of blame all of society's ills on. And what they settled on was violent horror and exploitation movies, which were getting put into like homes, and like children were being exposed to these like horrific corruptive influences. Like, isn't it always think of the children whenever like they want a boogeyman to kind of like and so essentially the right-wing government and like cooperation with the kind of like right-wing press and various kind of like provocateurs like Mary Whitehouse, who ran like a concerned citizens like campaign, started this thing called they called them the Video Nasties, which were like these like horrible films which are unspeakable. And a bit after a big extended pressure campaign, the government introduced the Video Recordings Act 1984, which essentially gave them the power to kind of like prosecute retailers and distributors who sold films which were deemed to be video nasties as obscene. Like, they used old obscenity laws, so they were putting people in jail.
They didn't make them.
Right.
So
I love it.
like,
That's so crazy.
And so like so it's like if you should read into it, like like I've written a lot about it. And you can find like documentaries about it. It's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm
So by
definitely
the
gonna look into
90s,
that.
that had waned a little bit. But I remember one of my first experiences of like thinking like fuck the man was like when I was like 7 years old, and like it was Child's Play 3 was like there's a whole moral panic about that. And it was what happened was like a tragic story. It was a horrific story of this young boy, Jamie Bulger, who was taken like he was like snatched by like two slightly older boys who were about 10 and 11, and they like brutally murdered this kid. That was horrific. It was all over the news. But apropos of nothing, the right wing media essentially just invented out of whole cloth this idea that these kids had watched Child's Play 3, and
Oh my
they,
God.
and they were copying like things from Child's Play 3 on this boy that they'd killed. They took it entirely from the fact that like the boy's body was found like in train tracks, and like there's like a train scene in like in Child's Play 3 essentially. So the right wing press ran full hog on this, and I remember vividly at this young age seeing a newspaper article. I think it was the Sun, but maybe it was the Star. But I think it was the Sun, where they essentially recreated all the horrible things that happened to this young boy, but using a Chucky doll instead. And like and they started this whole campaign. There's like this famous front page in the Sun called "Burn the Video Nasty," and it's a picture of Child's Play 3 on like a fire getting burned. And like so that was one of my earliest experiences, the whole bit of the Video Nasty moral panic. So it was still, so even though it was kind of like as furore was in the 80s, it was still around in the 90s. Like there was movies like The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I remember not seeing because they weren't released or allowed to be screened until like the late 90s. Like so this is kind of something that'll linger for a long time. So yeah, this is the kind of like environment that our story kind of like is set in. And our story follows Stumper with his like various like, friends that he's picked up. They all hang out at the local video shop, Monster Dome Video, and they watch covertly video nasties that they've acquired. In this group they call the Murder Club. So they watch these movies and they kind of like it's always kind of a sense of community. Hello, and like. But the video shop's in trouble. It's kind of like in dire straits. Like a big chain competitor that's opened up across the road. They don't know what's going to happen in the future. But they score this coup. They've managed to agree to get this big, massive horror festival hosted in their small town in Scotland in Rutherglen. But the star attraction is going to be that the video shop has acquired House of Creeping Flesh, which is the rarest, most notorious video nasty of all. It's so notorious that nobody's seen it. Nobody knows what it's about. All they know is that it's cursed and scary things happen. Like to people who've seen this, supposedly there's all these like stories about its like malign nature. So they get this movie and they think their fortunes are going to turn around, but they're going to watch it themselves to see what happens, and they promptly destroy the tape by accident. So they then realise that this movie's so notorious and so like feared that nobody's seen it, nobody knows what it's about. So they realise that they can make their own version of this movie and try and pass it off as the real thing. So like and that's where the kind of like story kind of goes, where it becomes like jump back and forth between like the actual story and us seeing like the making of this movie, plus like maybe there's some truth to the idea of this thing maybe being cursed. And then there's things start changing all around them. You start thinking like Red Ennis maybe starts becoming not so imaginary. And like so like it kind of has kind of darker elements, but also it's very funny, it's very silly. There's kind of a lot of coming of age elements in there. And yeah, I think
rom-com.
like, a little bit of rom-com.
Gotta have rom-com. John Lee's in rom-com.
Yeah, I think
John Lee's in rom-com.
I like to say I'm a frustrated rom-com writer, but yeah, I think if you like horror, and if you're of my generation, especially if you grew up in the 90s and you remember video shops and all that. I think
this sounds awesome.
You think you'll have a lot of fun with this book. For me, again, it's one of my favourite things I've written. I think like it's been a blast to work with Fall. I think like working with Fall is going to make this like the biggest book that I've done. And yeah, it launches in March, and I think it's going to be my biggest book yet. So if you've enjoyed everything that I've done up to this point. This is the next level up. To get that title back in there.
Hey!
The name of the show, he said it.
Like, please do check out The Nasty. You know, it's
Word
an
of the
8-issue
day.
series. It's like a big sprawling thing, and it's a lot of fun.
Do you have a code for it by any chance?
Do you know I was actually going to send the code, and I thought every time I prepare a code, no one's interested in it. But
I'll get it for you. You're good. I'll get it.
Yeah,
You don't have to.
I've got to hand it 1 second.
Okay.
Newsletter. Okay, here we go. It's not there. Right. It's like 1 second. I'll get you. Just pop the cover for me. I'm just playing on the previews page now. Okay, it is. Drum roll, please. Jan 231 934.
Perfect.
There we go. As a child of the 90s, I can't wait for this book. Calling all children of the 90s. I know, like, this is like the book for you. So, or children of all ages, I think will enjoy it too.
And there's so many good covers.
That's Travis hopping over like my name, my graphic there. So I thought I'd become Travis.
That's how that works, right?
The covers are so good for this book too. That's
and there's more covers still to be revealed coming up soon, and some of them are crackers, and when we're talking about covers, like Vault had said to me, like, who would you like to have do covers, and I just gave them a wish list of some like pie in the sky choices, and they got them, and I'm really excited to share some of these, and some of the upcoming covers as well. I just think it's such a fun book to work on, and like when I was doing the Crimson Cage, I spent a lot of time watching a lot of like pro wrestling, especially 80s pro wrestling, NWA stuff. For this, for The Nasty, I've been immersing myself in just schlock horror, watching so many like cheesy slashers from the 80s, and like 90s, and just gorging and trash horror and getting in that mindset. And it's been a lot of fun. And like I've been trying to kind of like capture that with like the world of the story. Like you'll see, I've been posting a lot on social media, all these various fake horror movie posters and horror movie titles. They're all incorporated into the book. You'll see all these little posters like all around the video shop, and we'll be talking about like various horror movie titles and conversation. I just created this whole ecosystem of fake horror movies and fake movie franchises, which I think people will get a kick out of.
You don't even know. I literally last week watched a guy who took the Stab movies from Scream and told you what they were about. And I watched the whole thing, and I was like,
perfect.
I don't know why I'm watching this. This is so unimportant, but I'm just fascinated that he did it.
It couldn't matter less, but you love it.
Yeah, just let the folk care that much.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's why we like comics. Except comics can be important.
We were just like, what is comics? It's not a love for minutia and continuity.
Exactly. You got to be okay with 95% of what you're reading to not matter.
Ouch!
I just spotted a little graphic
revolving. 95%. I read a lot. That means there's still a huge amount of good stuff.
That includes all of my entire oeuvre of work. So
yeah, obviously this is the 5% I'm talking about. Plus,
that's stuff.
Wait, hold on. Is that's a John Lee's box? Is it labeled John Lee's?
No, yes. Okay. I didn't just throw it in one of my magazine containers for this episode.
I think there should be a picture of my face in the side, just like grinning.
Right.
It's like a Wheaties box, but it says John Lee's.
Your pal, John Lee's.
Yeah.
Well, and you can use any of your time.
Cry with your pal, John Lee's.
Sink in with John Lee's. Get the nasty with John Lee's. Like, you can put whatever you want.
Hit up the hotel with John Lee's.
So good. So, John, I know it's late there, so we have some questions to wrap this up.
Could you dim your lights while we do that? It's more dramatic at this point.
My light switch is like way over there.
No, that's all right. That's too far.
Well, before we get, is there anything else you want to talk about? Any books that are coming out that we need to know about as well?
Well, yeah, like because of the Nasties coming out, obviously at some point this year we're going to have Sync Volume 3 dropping.
Right.
Look for that soon. Hopefully, depending on what happens, we might see the last ride of Pillar and Pride come out.
Okay.
I would say with things are up in the air for that, but hopefully that will come out. And yeah, other than that, just you can follow my newsletter at deepender.johnleescomics.com. That's deep-ender.johnleescomics.com. You can follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/John Lees. The online shop, if you want to pick up some of these books we've been talking about, is johnleescomics.bigcartel.com.
That one's in the description.
Yeah,
I didn't get the first couple, but that one's in the description.
And that's the most important one because that's when we can give you money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then your Twitter is also in the description, so you can go from there to the other money things.
Yeah.
Nice. And I think you have one other book that's like going to come out this year that's just not announced, right? If I'm not mistaken from your newsletter, or is that mistaken? Am I wrong?
No, right now, in terms of the stuff, like everything, like, that is actively in production has been announced. The stuff that like I've been talking about and alluding to is basically stuff that I'm just like developing and hoping.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah. So hopefully it will be coming out, but like it's not guaranteed.
Hopefully there's 10 titles coming out, but now.
I heard
and a Justin Fair World.
Yeah, I heard that Sync, you're going to be doing like 2 double-sized issues, right? And then they're going to separate it for the direct market. Is that what I heard?
I don't know how much I'm allowed to reveal or how much like Tyler might.
I know, so I can.
He might send the snipers after me if I say too much, but I can say that.
What's that
we are planning to do some kind of inventive things, like with the Kickstarter model. We're going to try and experiment with some new formats.
Nice.
As eventually going to come out in the direct market in the classic single issue format, but we're going to be trying to do some interesting things with the Kickstarter beforehand.
It's going to keep. I'm going to keep being able to add on to the hardcovers,
still
right?
Be able to get those as well. We will always have them.
Okay.
Actually, now that you've mentioned that, I did just look at a new Charles Paul Wilson cover just this week. So,
yeah.
They're so cute. These are the ones that I read to my kid. Because they have really cute covers.
Yeah, no, as long as you keep all the graphic descriptions in your bedtime stories reading that.
Yeah. Look at those clowns.
I read Neil Gaiman's Talking to Girls at Parties. I think that's the name of it. How to Talk to Girls at Parties. And because I was thinking about this interview, I was just like, oh, this is 64 pages, 64 pages. This should get a nice hardcover too. If this can do it, then that can do it.
It's still my dream to eventually. I think we've maybe got enough for between Sync Volume 1, Sync Volume 2, and Dig. I want to start getting like omnibuses put out. Covers, sleeves and stuff.
Can they be super like slipcase fanciness? Because I'm all about it.
That's my bucket list dream to eventually be able to do that. So we'll see.
And you can put them on like a podium. So you can just like have it laid out like a large Bible.
Yeah, exactly. My Bible,
Yeah.
And make sure you're missing one thing, like all omnibuses, because it makes everyone mad.
Yes.
So whatever that one thing, you got to make sure that's not there, so everyone complains about it.
Where's that weird scene in Dig? You just took out a scene from Dig? That's weird.
I did like a 1-page like Sync story for an anthology. I'll just not put that in.
Yeah.
People, that's always what I see for omnibuses. Why does it have this? Because it was 4 pages and not necessary to the story.
Because it was a tie-in of a tie-in.
Right, let's get these questions.
Yeah, we got some questions so you can get to bed.
Oh, plus one for an oversized omnibus. That's one sale. So thank you.
There we go. Oh, you got one. That's 2. We got 2.
Two? Oh, man.
We got it.
I'll buy a soft cover. I'm cheap. I buy a soft cover. Tell Tyler, watch this interview.
2.5. Perfect.
All right. So I will do the first one. All right. John Lees, what do you think makes you stand out in the comics market?
Obviously how good I look in a Speedo. But other than that.
True. I've seen a lot of pictures of that.
Yeah. That's my niche now. I think, for me, I think, it's not necessarily what makes just me stand out, because a lot of people could probably say the same thing, but I think that I tell stories that matter to me, and I feel very particular to me. I think, it would be easy to kind of, look and go, what's the market right now? What stories would be fashionable? I don't really do that. I tell stories means something to me in particular, and like, you know, I have a strong connection to. And maybe not everyone's going to have that same connection, but it means the folk that do have those same feelings will vibe all the more because, like, you know, hopefully they see my enthusiasm is genuine and that's kind of contagious, and hopefully it resonates with them as well.
It's a good answer. It's a
Awesome.
good answer.
Yeah. What makes you keep going when shit gets rough?
Spite.
Yeah, I love it.
No.
Yes, best motivator.
No, like for me, it's just like, you know, yeah, like things can get shit, like, you know, you can have setbacks, you know,
Pandemic.
projects can fall apart, publishers can fuck you, like, you know, there's like all kind of things that can happen, but like at the end of the day, you can't stop telling stories. Like, you know, like it's like for me, it's like what makes life worth living. Like, you know, like living in these worlds and creating them. Like, you know, and there's no better feeling than making something from nothing that somebody else likes, you know, or that people has an impact on people. The way my favorite stories have an impact on me. But that's like something you can't stop doing. Like I said, you know, like it's a compulsion, like maybe not a healthy compulsion, but it's there, you know. And for me, like that's like, you know, when you talk about like the drudgery of like life or whatever, like something that kind of like lifts me above that, you know, or you know, everything else can be crap, you know, or stressful or anxiety inducing, but if I can sit and live in a world for a little while and think up ideas and make up these characters, like, you know, it makes things better. Like, you know, it makes me happy. So that's why I keep on going. Because as much as it's stressful, the positive impact it has in my life still outweighs the negative. And if that changes, I'll stop writing, but it hasn't yet.
Awesome.
That's good. All right, the next one, and there may be a
Love it.
fourth one.
So comfy
depending
cozy
on-
from a predominantly horror writer. I love it.
I get all my nastiness out of the page.
Yeah, exactly. It's all there. It's like metal music. It gets the aggression out, so
Yeah.
you're just super
No,
chill.
it's the ones who write all the twee, cuddly, uwu stories you've got to watch out for. They're the
Yeah,
monsters.
they're the ones that are like, whoa, don't want to see them on the street.
I remember John Lees is our rom-com story. Rom-com.
Yeah, exactly.
John
Yeah.
Lees.
Yes,
From rom-com, huh?
the rom-com specialist.
Rom-com specialist. Number 3. So what does leveling up look like to you, for you? So what is a level up? What is your next level of career? Where do you want to be 5
I think
years?
like for me, it's like leveling up is being able to reach more readers, being able to kind of like get work with like, you know, like tell bigger stories, better stories, like that more people can connect with, be able to reach a bigger audience, and then in turn having more success to be able to have the clout to tell more of the stories that I want to tell.
Right.
That for me, like, you know, like for me, like the ideal, like, you know, yeah, being able to do like what to be able to work for Marvel or DC, whatever, would be nice. But more than that, what I want is like the dream for me, whether it takes 5 years or 10 years or never, like, you know, like with the dream, like for me would be is that my name and like on a book becomes enough of like, you know, a brand and a signifier of success that I am able to pitch a book, and it can be a weird idea that seems fucking bizarre and unsellable, but I can say I want to do this and folk will go, well, it's John, so I'll let him do it, you know. And
Yeah.
like, you know, but also on top of that, you know, something else I'd love is being able to have the clout to kind of get other creators that I'm a big fan of, like, you know, people that I've known going way back, especially a lot of Scottish creators that I've known since the early days of like my writing group. Like, I'd love to be able to, like, you know, have the influence to be able to say this person's great, this person, like, you should give them a chance and people will listen to me because, like, you know, I've done like XYZ. That's something that's meant a lot to me as well. That for me, like, it's the kind of, you know, like apex of leveling up, having the freedom to, and whether that's financial freedom, you know, or whatever, but, you know, freedom to, like, whatever that means, to tell the stories that I want to tell, the way that I want to tell them, to have them be read, and also to have my friends be able to tell the stories they want to tell as well. That would be the apex of leveling up for me.
That's amazing. I love that. It's the, once you get through the window, you help other people get through the window.
Yeah.
You don't just keep running. You help them get them through. And I love that.
Yep. So then it means then, like, you know, I have more people in the room with me if I want to then stand on their shoulders to get to the next floor. So.
Exactly. You got to have the bodies underneath.
I need someone to give me a leg up. You know?
Yeah, you got to have the human ladder. And then last question. So that's
the human centipede there.
Yes, it's the old Human Centipede comic book acceleration. You know,
which Human Centipede was the best rom-com of the early 2000s.
Yeah. Speaking of Human Centipede, you never want to start an analogy with like speaking of Human Centipede, but I remember a panel at Glasgow Comic Con many years ago, and it was me and Ian Laurie, and it was a couple of other creators, and they were asking them like, how do you view the writer-artist like relationship? And the artist of this other team was a very sweet, very nice, very cuddly guy who does very nice all ages comics. Said, well, I like to think of it as like Twilight, when a werewolf bonds for life with like, you know, their chosen partner, and they form like a connection, and you know, like that kind of like mark is left on their, you know, their partner for life, and they grow together. And then the panelists said, you know, like the kind of like person asking the questions, whatever you call that, I forget. But they said, well, that's very nice. Like, what do you think, John? Do you think, is that how you view the writer-artist relationship? And I said, well, I think it's more like the Human Centipede. But you know, I spot out shit into the mouth of the artist, and then
and then it makes its way down.
Who then spots out that shit into the mouth of the colorist, and then spots out that shit into the mouth of the letterer, who then spots it into a comic book.
It's like, hi, we're at the end being like, thanks, that wasn't the worst.
Yeah. And in an ideal situation, someone outside of it will pay for it.
Yes.
That's a human situation.
Who's letting this keep going?
Yeah, like the letter, like, after the letter on the chain is like the retailer, and the retailer spits into the mouth of the
Yeah, can we be at the front? We're paying for this.
Sorry, what was the question?
Obviously, that's the pinnacle of your leveling up is, you know, the ultimate Human Centipede. Yeah. Before then, as the final question, what do you see as your next level up? Where do you see going next? You've already gone quite far into the spectrum of success in comics. What do you see next?
I think the next level up is right in front of me. The next level up is Dynasty, and like what my hope is for this is the next level up for that is for this book to be my most successful book, for it to like attract more readers, like, you know, and because I think I look at my career and I think I'm doing pretty well. Like, I've done some books I'm proud of. But a lot of times, sometimes these books will go under the radar thing. Like, you know, I look at the year end, like, you know, awards lists, and I look, you know, and like, you know, they don't always get mentioned. You know, I would love to have a book that people really notice, and really kind of like, it makes people pay attention, and, you know, attracts a wider readership, you know, who then go back and look at my other books. So yeah, that's my hope. Like, my next level up is Dynasty. I hope this book takes off to the level that I hope it can, and I believe it's good enough to. And when I'm working with Vault, who do great books that do break out, I do have high hopes that that's possible. So yeah, fingers crossed. Dynasty is my next level up.
Let's hope so, because I just lost the Blue Flame, which was one of my favorite books going right now, and I need a new Vault book to just go crazy over. So it's set up right there. I'm all set. So everyone else should too. Yeah. I'm pretty excited about it.
We'll invite Alonzo on this to work on Hotel 3.
Oh yeah, like, you know, or just harass him on Twitter. Like,
we'll invite him on the show. We'll be like, hey, we need to talk to you about leveling up. Hey, no questions. Let's talk about Hotel 3.
Level up from Hotel Volume 2 to Level Hotel Volume 2.
You could do 4 if it's like a whole when the movie comes out thing. Just do 3 now and we'll do 4 later. Yeah. We can wait.
Yeah. But yeah, beyond that, like, next level up would be like, you know, I think always just wanting the next thing that I'm writing to be like something that I feel is like the best thing that I'm doing. Like, I don't want to feel like the best thing that I did is like something I did before. Like, I want everything I write to be something I feel passionate about. And like, you know, like the thing that I'm writing right now, like, you know, it's not like, you know, I'm with a publisher. I've not even really pitched it yet. but I'm writing the scripts and I'm like, yeah, this feels special. Like I'm really happy with this. So for me, that's the thing. Keep on leveling up. Like keep on trying to be better as a writer, and that's how you level up.
Amazing.
Well, I mean,
great.
you also level up on art team. You pick the best art teams, like hands
Yeah,
down.
like,
So
you know, like
every time.
I think
You
like,
get super blessed.
I found a couple of artists who I love working with, like, you know, and I get on with and that I trust, and like, you know, if I can keep on working with those guys forever, that'd be great.
But I think we're done. We can
I
let John
agree,
go to
Cormac.
bed.
You hear that? Forever.
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 I'm afraid to like. He's one of my dream writers to do something with, and I'm afraid to even message him. He'd be like, "Yeah, I could do it in 2027." When I have
I was talking about Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking like you know how like the Egyptians, like you know the Egyptian pharaohs, like when they died, they buried with their
You take him
slaves.
with you.
Like, you know, I'm taking Alex with me when I go.
All right, Alex, come here.
Nice.
To the tomb for you. That's the ultimate omnibus.
Well, thank you, John. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
I think it's a damn shame that Marvel and DC isn't knocking on your door, because you were one of my favorite writers, and I'm not bullshitting. You were one of my favorite. Actually, you know that because I private messaged you. Like every one of your books.
That's really nice of you to say. Like, you know, thank you very much for the kind words. And yeah, like, you know, like it does. If Marvel and DC would be nice, but as long as I can, like, you know, be writing stuff that, like, you know, people resonate with, like, you know, and like gets, you know, awesome folk like you saying kind things to me, that's enough for me.
This isn't happening there, so I'm okay with it right now.
Yeah. Don't sign an exclusive.
Yeah,
Just do like
please don't take this away.
Yeah.
This needs. I need 10 volumes of both Hotel and Sync. Then just do whatever you want.
Die probably at that point.
And that's where Alex goes. But yeah,
yes.
Thank you so much. And it's always great to hear you talk about. You can tell how passionate you are about this, and that this isn't just something that you're looking to do for something else. You can tell that you really care about it, and you work on your craft, and it shows, and it does show. I feel like every single time something new comes out from you, I'm like, this is the best Lees. This is the best Lees.
That's what I'm hoping for.
This is the best Lees, and that's the idea. It should, like, that's what you hope for. It. I think you're there so far. So I'm very, not to put pressure on it, but I'm very excited about the Nasty.
I'm very excited about it too.
So everyone should go check that out.
Order it. You have until Wednesday to order it. Then there'll be Final Cut Art by Wednesday.
Yes.
Please order.
Do it. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I think, Todd, everyone has leveled up. I think this interview is great. We've successful. People have leveled up. So you've leveled up with Todd, myself, and John Lees. Play that outro, Todd.
Night, everybody.